In a joint filing between the Walt Disney Company and Gina Carano has revealed who she wants to take the witness stand, or maybe some depositions. Disney has disagreed with that. Could we see Kathleen Kennedy, Bob Chapek, Pedro Pascal, even Jon Favreau take the stand? Let's talk about that on That Park Place. Hello, I am Jonas J. Campbell, an investigative reporter for That Park Place, and here with me is Mr. VashSky. Vash, are you the courtroom reporter for our proceedings today?
I believe I am, and boy, oh boy, are we about to have some star witnesses take the stand.
That's right. We're going to go through a lot of information very quickly here. For those of you who happen to be walking into this fresh, Gina Carano is suing the Walt Disney Company. The Walt Disney Company filed a motion to dismiss this lawsuit. That motion was denied by Judge Sherilyn Peace Garnett over there in California. And now it seems that this is proceeding to trial, and they're moving to discovery, which is where everyone requests their evidence from the other, and everyone has to share all of the evidence that they have. No surprises in the courtroom as far as that is concerned. And in this joint filing, the intention here is to take all the inflammatory language out. This is what I get for following Mr. Ron Coleman, getting to know all of these things right here. They've taken all the inflammatory language out, and they both agreed, for the most part, on what the trial is going to be about. In this, Gina Carano has provided a list of witnesses that she would like to testify. Now, in that, they're saying testify. It's probably more like a deposition, and we'll see who testifies when the trial actually happens, probably sometime next year. September is the date of record at the moment for 2025. Yes, it's going to be that long until we get there. But let's see this list here and why they are included on the list. Parties, evidence, etc. Carano's position. Carano is an individual and thus does not have any subsidiaries, parents, or affiliates. This is in contrast to Disney, which has Walt Disney Company or Walt Disney Enterprises if it was in the UK, Huckleberry, which is the production entity in charge of The Mandalorian, and of course, Lucasfilm, because it's Disney, Lucasfilm, and then Huckleberry on this. Key witnesses and parties include Gina Carano. Vash, why is Gina Carano included on this list?
Because she's the plaintiff?
Yep, that's right. She would presumably have the strongest testimony for why she believes the Disney Company wronged her and fired her for discriminatory reasons here. United Talent Agency and IDPR. These are actually, the first one is the easiest to point out. United Talent Agency was her agency when she was working for Lucasfilm there, and they let her go very soon after Lucasfilm issued their statement saying that Gina Carano was reprehensible for the views that she expressed online.
And I think there's a question of coordination there, right? I think there's a question where maybe or she might have been blacklisted by not just Disney, but maybe the entire industry, and that maybe United Talent Agency had something to do with that. Is that the allegation?
Yeah, I do believe so. Now, it looks like a coordinated effort at that point, and also her PR agency got rid of her at the same time. Now, I do want to point out IDPR. This is their website right now, and every time you click, it changes eyeballs. Every time you click. It's real weird. But we're going to go back to the filing now. Let's see. Jon Favreau, obviously the director of The Mandalorian and the showrunner for The Mandalorian, the first few episodes, specifically Jon Favreau. He's, of course, the director of the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, supposedly the person who told Gina Carano that she was going to be the head of Rangers of the New Republic. Any question there as to why she would bring Jon Favreau onto the stand?
Perhaps he could testify in some way as to maybe at the point at which Rangers of the New Republic was in development. Maybe he could point to the fact that they were maybe going to hit production at a certain point. Maybe he had given certain statements to lead Gina to believe that she was not only employed by the Walt Disney Company, but that she had a great deal on the horizon. Mm-hmm. I think all of those things require addressing, because apparently Gina has emails to the fact, but perhaps Jon Favreau could speak to more details related to them.
Yep. Now, I am going to add there are some people who are left off this list, and we're going to talk about why they might have been left off this list here as well. Now, there's more as we go on. Pedro Pascal. Pedro Pascal is included, presumably, one, because he's a co-star in The Mandalorian. Reportedly, Pedro Pascal and Gina Carano actually get along pretty well on a professional level, but Pedro Pascal released tweets that compared a different political party's leader to someone from, let's say, the Weimar Republic, someone from maybe when we want to say those World War II villains, the guy at the top compared a sitting president to that guy. Now, maybe it's not an apples to apples. Maybe it's a Granny Smith to Honeycrisp comparison here. But the point still stands. Pedro Pascal was making comparisons to that same era. Also, I want to point out that maybe our beloved Carl Weathers was making comparisons that way and was not shown the door. Now, here's where the names get a little bit more interesting. Kathleen Kennedy. I'm not familiar with this name, Vash. Who's Kathleen Kennedy? Wasn't she like a low-level producer on Raiders of the Lost Ark or something?
Yeah. I think she may have had something to do with Back to the Future as well at one point. I'm actually surprised to see her name included in this list. I thought she was inconsequential, but there you go.
For those of us who don't understand sarcasm, and there are those people in our audience that are not versed in sarcasm, yes, Kathleen Kennedy is the head of Lucasfilm. She's been in Hollywood forever. Also reportedly not a big fan of Gina Carano, and would have been the final word in approving the firing and why the firing happened. Also might have some answers that to the question that will be brought up of, if the Force is female, if Lucasfilm is pointing towards strong female characters, why did you take your most popular female character, despite the fact that The Mandalorian didn't have the budget of these Rey movies? Right. Why would you take your most popular female character and show her the door, as opposed to keeping her there and enjoying the Force being female?
That is the question of the day right there. And also, too, I mean, Kathleen Kennedy, she obviously knew about Rangers of the New Republic at some point. There's a famous photo of her standing in front of all of these.
It was an Investors Day, and you are absolutely correct. Yes, she was the one who announced the show at Bob Chapek's Disney Plus presentation for Investors Day. Bob Chapek was the head of the company at the time that Gina Carano was walked out the door. We could bring up the stock chart one more time, but the Disney stock was trading at 190, 200-ish. And now it's down. I think it's down to 95 now. I need to go check. They've been fiddling with streaming stuff lately, so there's a little bit of a bump in the stock price usually when they do that. But if you divide the stock price in half, you'd be about where they are now. So Bob Chapek will probably be called to the stand to answer for why she was fired. Bob Iger is not on this list, though, despite the fact that he was at the company at the time.
That's really interesting. And we did hear that Bob Iger may have been the head of the creative, or at least that's what he alleged at the time that he handed the reins off to Bob Chapek there in 2020. That's an interesting omission. I do also wonder, like, as amazing as it sounds to get Bob Chapek on the stand potentially, or to give it a deposition in this instance, and we all know that NDAs, which Bob Chapek is probably under, don't omit you from being included on this list and from testifying. I do wonder his culpability in all of this, and perhaps that's something that they want to suss out. Hey, was this your decision, or was this Kathleen Kennedy's decision to walk away from Gina Carano? Very interesting.
Yeah, this is an issue where I think it was alleged in the lawsuit that he was on the email chain that eventually led to her firing. There was a discussion of the events in January, right after the election, and they started talking about those events and then deviated to start talking about Gina Carano. And they said that they needed to take a bold stance to say Gina Carano does not endorse the events of this event in January. We're being vague because we're on YouTube right now.
Right.
Because YouTube will go, what are you talking about? Are you fiddling with elections or something like that? It doesn't matter, except that it's relevant to the conversation of what was on Disney's mind here. They viewed resistance to their preferred narrative as that dangerous. That's fascinating to me. Now, it also relates to Lynne Hale, who was I believe the head of communications for Lucasfilm at the time. She had been at Lucasfilm for a long time, I think in the George Lucas era of Lucasfilm, and she has since retired, left the company. I don't know if she's retired or just left, but she's no longer at Lucasfilm. And I think maybe the purported emails might have accidentally been forwarded by Miss Lynne Hale here. So no surprise for those of us who are following this closely that Lynne Hale would be asked to testify. So for those of you who don't recognize that name. Now, Bear Grylls. Who's Bear Grylls, Vash?
Bear Grylls is kind of like the modern version of Crocodile Hunter. He's an adventurer. He's an explorerman. He's a very interesting personality, and he obviously has started a bunch of television productions with him going out in these distant locations and surviving in the wilderness and so forth. And apparently, as part of his show on the National Geographic side of Disney Plus, he starred in an episode of his show with Gina Carano, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So Bear Grylls was the host. Host is a funny word of Man versus Wild, where we would go out into the wilderness, often with not much of a pack, and then survive in wilder situations. That was a Discovery Channel show. But this one that's in question was Running Wild with Bear Grylls, Nat Geo production. And Gina was on an episode of this show, and Disney decided to remove references to her from the description of the show and might have even pulled the episode altogether. And it was brought to Bear Grylls' attention that she had been kind of scrubbed from it. This was May 10th of 2021. So not long after, of course, Gina Carano's firing was in February. The episode would have aired originally about May 10th there. So, he does relate to the cancellation attempts. Now, we've got
maybe a coordination attempt.
Yeah. Now, of course, National Geographic, of course, a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company here. There are some items here for key documents and pieces of evidence that people want to bring in. This one's going to be interest documents showing plans for Rangers of the New Republic series, as well as other series in which Carano would have had a role. That's going to be very important. Now, one name that has been asked of us for why isn't he taking the stand is Mark Hamill. As far as we know, Gina Carano and Mark Hamill have not worked together other than the episode of The Mandalorian where Luke Skywalker shows up. And I don't even know if she would have been on screen with it. It could have been shot in a way that Mark Hamill was never there with her at the same time. How he does relate to this is Mark Hamill is infamous on his Twitter account for his political takes and his distaste for anything right-leaning in the United States. So he has been well protected. Obviously, he's still working for the Walt Disney Company on occasion, perhaps even, if you follow the rumors, being in the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, or that they might be retooling some series to incorporate Luke Skywalker more into the show. Now, does Mark Hamill have to be involved at this point? No, probably not. He could have signed a contract and collected a big fat check and not worked with him ever again, and they could just continue to use his likeness forever. But probably out of respect for Mark Hamill, they're going to continue to use him for stand-ins, even though they probably don't need that, in the same way that they don't need James Earl Jones to show up and do new Darth Vader lines because they have his voice. Mark Hamill is a hot topic because, one, he's male. He's on the other side of the political aisle, or perceived as the other side of the political aisle from Gina Carano. Her clear politics are not necessarily a matter of record here. And there's no indication that Disney has reacted with any kind of disciplinary action towards him. He might even be, as some have theorized, a paid political operative of the Democrat Party, and he's fine to continue on here. Vash, do you have anything to say on that before we get to Disney's additions to this list?
Yeah, I don't think Mark Hamill would be relevant. Now, obviously, his posts might be, but do we necessarily have to have his testimony in order to speak to that? I don't think so. So, makes sense that why he might not be included. But it's Disney's picks that are very interesting.
Well, yeah, let's get to that. Although Disney disagrees with Carano's list above, this is the section that is assumingly written by Disney. Although Disney disagrees with Carano's list of witnesses above, without repeating those already enumerated, Disney additionally identifies. So they're not saying that they're taking anybody off the list, but they're adding in these two names. If Disney wants someone for deposition, that means that Gina Carano's side would have access to that person for deposition. So Carrie Beck, she's very high up at Lucasfilm. She's a VP at Lucasfilm, the head of live production. At this point, I do believe she was head of animation for a little while in some way. Creative agencies are a little bit harder to quantify here, but Carrie Beck, very high up at Lucasfilm. If Kathleen Kennedy were, let's say, a figurehead, I think Carrie Beck would be closer to the head of Lucasfilm. Obviously, Dave Filoni at this point is considered the CCO of Lucasfilm, but I don't think he necessarily would have been high up on the list of people making this decision. Perhaps that's true. And also Paul Roeder currently is an executive vice president of the Walt Disney Company in charge of communications. He was in charge of communications on a lower level for the company in 2021. Now, their list here is much different from Gina Carano's. Documents supporting Carano's claim damages, including without limitation her claimed emotional distress and lost job opportunities outside of Disney. This is the one that might get a little embarrassing here because it will be their intention to try to say that she never had a career and that maybe Disney was just doing her a little bit of a favor or something like this. The point of theirs is going to be try to say that she never would have had a career anyways, which is, that's going to be their strategy here. One name we're also asked about is Pablo Hidalgo, and why is he not included in this list? He's one of the members of the story group, and I other than maybe perhaps being in agreement with Lucasfilm about their actions, I don't know that he would be relevant to this. It might be interesting to see if he comes up in any of the discovery that will definitely be taking place. Vash, what do you think about all of this? Do you think these people are actually going to take the stand? Do you think that any of these depositions will see the light of day before they take the witness stand in, September of 2025?
I don't know if that's going to be necessarily the case, but if assuming this does go to trial and not settled out of court in some fashion before then, and actually reaches trial, and then we do get depositions, maybe even live depositions in court, gotta get those transcripts. That is for sure. I gotta know what was actually stated in this courtroom. But I think the witness list is pretty decent right there. The main important thing is who are the power players that had an influence on this decision, who actually made this decision, and what are the conversations that they had. And I think the witness list is most relevant in that direction, and it's shouldn't call everybody in. So I think the requests being made, I think the judge would approve of such. So good call on this list. I think it's tight and to the point.
I think you're right. Now, the next thing that we want to do is ask for your comments on this list. Who do you think should have been added to this list? Who are you just chomping at the bit to see if they will take the stand? I'm going to remind you that there will probably not be cameras in that courtroom. There will probably be transcripts. So there will be a lot to talk about. And we're all hoping that if there's something strange going on there at Lucasfilm, that we'll all get to understand it a little bit better. That being said, please like this video if you found it helpful in any way, and consider subscribing to That Park Place since we're going to be covering this in detail for all the news that should be fun.
Thanks for watching That Park Place News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.